Welcome to Savage Simplicity Storytellers, where I talk with smart women who are doing smart things to build lives that work for them. I'm your host, Bernadette Hill, and today on Savage Simplicity, I'm talking with author and keynote speaker Elisabeth Swan about the power of continuous improvement. Elisabeth's career didn't start in continuous improvement. In fact, her skills were honed on the improv stage, where she had to quickly assess the energy coming from the audience and her fellow actors in order to deliver a performance that delighted everyone involved. Now, with over 30 years helping organizations unlock the potential of their people through continuous improvement, Elisabeth is the co-author of the Problem Solvers Toolkit, co-host of the Just in Time Cafe podcast, and a trusted guide for leaders around the world. She is the sole author of Picture Yourself a Leader and the creator of the Praise Paradox workshop, where she challenges us to rethink how recognition fuels growth and how the human side of continuous improvement is what really drives transformation. Welcome to the show, Elisabeth Swan.
Thank you for having me, Bernadette.
Wonderful. Well, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to actually start with how we met, which was a couple of years ago, and then hopefully you'll be able to expand on the story. But a few years ago, you were a keynote speaker at UC Davis. One of the most important points I took from that conversation was about how we are not always ready for ideas in the moment that we're told to be ready for ideas, right? When we have brainstorming sessions or when we sit down and spend that time to really think through something. When I have an idea, wherever I am, I put it in my phone and I actually email it to myself. And then I'll see it the next day at work with all the little notes. And so it's so funny because when I'm teaching a 5S for Outlook class, I go to my email and most of the emails that I have sitting in my inbox are really from me about notes. So that was one story. And I just wanted to introduce that story because you are such an incredible thought leader. And I wanted to ask you about how you've spent your career in life teaching and guiding others. How did those instincts shape your desire to learn continuous improvement in the first place?
That's a really interesting point. And I just want to touch on briefly what you described, which is when you have your best idea flow is something called theta waves. And like you said, they come when you're doing something rote, like driving or walking the dog, doing the dishes, people say on their commutes. And what you've done is the smart thing, right? You're getting yourself set up so that you can like grab them when you get them because they come at those moments, or when you just wake up in the middle of the night. So you have a bedside notepad too, and then get them to yourself somehow. Some people do it with voice messages. I love that your inbox is so full of your own ideas. That means you're full of great ideas, which is amazing. So my course to continuous improvement is sort of an interesting route. I was just young. I was in my 20s and I wanted to be, free to be, traveling and doing what I wanted. And so I was temping and I temped a bunch of different places, but this one place was a continuous improvement firm. They had worked with helping to bring back Japan's economy post-World War II. They had guys that wrote books on setup production, just-in-time manufacturing. And they were just introducing me to concepts that I'd never been quite so impacted by before. And I knew these were all, as you just described to me, these were like, wow, these are thought leaders. These are the guys that, invented some of these things. So one of them in particular invited me to join him in creating an industrial video about the concept of value. And he had like 6 New York Times bestselling books out on quality. A man named John Gaspari, who I'm still friends with, but he was a VP at the time, and I was this pipsqueak. And he invited me to take part in that. And an interesting other intervention was at the same time I joined an improv troupe. That's a whole story in itself. Like, why did I go do that? But I took a workshop and then it turned into me joining it. But the people at the firm said, "Hey, can your troupe perform for us for Christmas?" And so I was like, Sure, I don't think I understood at the time what career limiting moves were and that this might be one of them. But I did it and I performed with the troupe. But what that told them was that I was good on my feet, that I was engaging, and a lot of them started inviting me out with them on gigs and said, "Why don't you come? I think you'd be great at teaching things like," at the time we called it task team training, right? How do we get teams to do process improvement together? So whereas I started as, a temp and helping them, redesign some of their workbooks, I dove in once they invited me.
So you don't have, I think it's fair to say and maybe I should ask this question. Did you have a technical background back then? Did you have a technical background? Was your education or your experience in something like continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma?
Absolutely nothing. I was a straight up English major, and I was also I had done work I had a graphic design degree. So I was a writer and a designer, and I was really good at making their stuff look and sound better. That's where I started, was working on their materials. But it turns out I like solving problems. And that's what improv is, right? It's solving problems on stage. So it just keeps, to me, it's all this sort of things that keep circling around. But yeah, my ability to translate, I think, became one of my best assets.
Back then, when you were sort of growing up in your career, did you imagine or think that you would be where you are now?
No.
You didn't think you'd be the Elisabeth Swan.
Yes, I have Deandra Wardell to thank for the capital THEE of before my name, but no, I did not know that would happen.
What was one of the most difficult challenges you faced along the way, especially earlier in your career in building that confidence? Because you were an improv, so I'm assuming is there some, innate confidence there? Did you have to build it?
Oh, improv was terrifying. And when I took this workshop, and honestly, I took the workshop because I saw Improv Boston perform. They were the longest running improv troupe in the state at the time. And I saw them perform and I thought, oh my goodness, what is improv and who are these people? And I went to a show and I swore one of the guys in the show was looking at me like, and he was really cute. And then they said they had a workshop and I'm like, oh, I'm going to take that workshop and meet that cute guy. I was young. And then I joined the workshop. I was with firemen and teachers and librarians. And, I thought, well, we're never going to be, funny, but, this will be great. And he turned out to be gay, but we're still friends. And so the workshop, we were supposed to have an end of the workshop was supposed to be that we did a show. The group of us did a show. And I remember thinking, well, that's probably what they do normally, but not with us. Like, we're not funny. This won't happen. And honestly, there were amazingly funny moments. Like, as it went along, it wasn't about whether in fact, if you were trying to be funny, you were going to kill a scene. So
Hmm.
it was not about that. It was about following the structures, the rules, and then it would come out. So I think at some point the instructor realized my mindset and said, we're going to do a show. So you better invite people. Like, this is happening. So I was like, ah. So I invited people and they came and the show was a huge success. And I realized that fear is a form of energy, and that if you know how to what the rules and the structures are, which is strange. Improv is full of rules and structure. Then you'll craft and move out of any position and move forward. And you can't kill it unless you try to be funny, really. Anyway, I think once that happened, my confidence in all things grew. I thought, if I can be up, and I used to do shows in front of thousands. And if I can do that, I could do anything. If I can do that without a script, what could I not do? So that alone changed the way I approach just about anything. Like, whether my fear level just kind of went to another plane. I was like, well, that's, what's that compared to improv?
Yeah. I can't even imagine doing improv. I can't even imagine it. But yeah, if you master it, man, the world's your oyster, right? How long ago was your last improv show? And then what was sort of your next step in your career?
I had to let go of improv because the next step in my career was happening. So as I described, improv had the people in process improvement world pulling me in, and then improv itself was pulling me on stage. But I realized I couldn't stay and do the rehearsals. Again, improv, but you have to practice how to follow the structures and the rules. uh, I just couldn't. I couldn't. The consulting career had me traveling, so
Hmm.
I actually ended up moving to New York to be with another firm. So it just it kiboshed improv, but I never stopped using improv for everything I did. All those rules are rules that help you do process improvement. They are underlying everything.
You mentioned in a previous conversation that we had, it's because, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but please correct me. It's because in improv, you're always scanning for, what you can use. How did those key kind of skills that you built in improv really poured over to continuous improvement and what you basically
Yeah.
in what you do today?
So when you are improvising, and I've described this to you before, you are problem solving on stage, right? You have some kind of something's going on. Somebody has put out an offer, right? They are traveling to meet the king. Who knows? But now you have to figure out how you're going to get there, what's going to happen. And the only way you're going to, it's joint problem solving, right? You're on stage with these other humans, you're inventing together. So you have to focus on the other human being. The only way this works is if you listen intently and focus. And you're listening for offers like you described. What could I use? And when you focus completely on other people, the parts of your brain that edit you, the self-critic in your brain, that gets quieted down. Uh, and that means your creativity can now cut loose because you're not inhibiting yourself at all. You can't, your brain can't do those two things at once. So focusing on the other, now think about that in the continuous improvement world. Focus on others, right? What are they dealing? What are they telling you? Listening, being completely aware of what's happening in the environment. All of that plays into being keenly aware of what's happening in any particular current condition, going to Gemba, all that. You're always told, listen to people, pay attention, respect for people. And I realized, oh, well, improv's the ultimate respect for people, right? You have to, otherwise you can't get
Mhm.
anywhere.
That's such a great point, and you're absolutely right. In continuous improvement, it's all about uh, figuring out what the needs of the customer are, and what the needs of your coworkers are, but basically what other people's needs are. Like you just mentioned, being able to be externally focused
Hmm.
and be able to draw on compassion and empathy and just putting yourself in another person's shoes, and then I don't know how you would make it funny. That would totally be beyond me. You've mentioned recently the praise. You've been doing some work around the praise paradox that came out of Picture Yourself a Leader. How did your early learnings, and then as you became a thought leader in this space, how was the praise paradox sort of an aha moment for you?
So during COVID, when not just me, but a lot of people had their worlds altered, and I suddenly was not traveling, and I had to rethink what I was doing. And one of the things that I started to consider was I've been at this and in this world for a lot of years. What have I learned? What can I put down on paper as, hey, here's a thing? And the way I always started doing that, because during COVID, the LinkedIn community was stronger than I'd ever experienced it. So I would put a story out there and say, hey, this thing happened. It was a challenge, or it was a mistake, or it was a disaster, or a failure, or somehow I learned something. Here's what I do differently now. And then I would ask, did you ever deal with that? What'd you do? And people were generous and interested, and some of the conversations went viral. And I started illustrating because I have that art background, right? So now I'm back to my English major, art degree, and I am putting an illustration to that issue. And I remember someone told me when they read the book, sometimes that they got the gist of the chapter from the illustration way faster than the title of the chapter, which is kind of fascinating to me. But yeah, trying to get an image to capture it. So then I kept doing that every week. And I actually started working with the Kata Girl Geeks. You know that group?
No, I'm going to write it
No?
down though.
Oh, you got to talk to them. Tracy Defoe is my main contact there, and Gemma Jones. Anyway, they had this again during COVID. I was, a little sponge for what was happening in the world. So do you know Toyota Kata at all? The sort of the routine, the practice?
My
Yes,
father,
yes.
yeah.
He is a part of their, he's not a Kata Girl geek, but he's very connected to the Kata Girl geeks. Uh,
Okay.
and so I joined them and used my book as a process that I was trying to get better at. Like, what are the better questions to use and to put to the group, and what were topics that were more sticky that people really wanted to talk about, and that helped me format the book. So and people kept saying, "Hey, can you put all these together?" I'd done it like for a year, so they're like, it'd be great to have these. But that was another discovery process because I was like, oh, what have I written about here? And it was all things around how you're really impacting, influencing, leading. A lot of times you don't realize it. So when I said picture yourself a leader, I was saying, imagine you're leading people because you probably are. You're having an impact whether you know it or not. And pulling that all together along with the wisdom of the crowd, because I learned from people. So I got what I learned, my reflections having learned from them, right? There's the story, the illustration, the wisdom of the crowd, my reflections, and then I had a section called Ink Makes You Think. And that comes from Mark Rosenthal, who is also tied in with the Kata gang. But and that was where I'd ask the reader, okay, do you deal with this? And what's something you can experiment with, right? So setting up a little improvement loop, right? What do you think will happen? And like sort of walking it through, doing your own experiments. And shoot, what was the thing you asked me that before? Oh, praise paradox. So
Yes.
what I realized was a lot of things that I discovered in there had to do with neuroscience. Just the thing that stuck with you, right? That where do you get your best idea flow? Well, it's not in your cubicle. It's not in a conference room, it's when you're out walking the dog. So honor that. And you did, right? And so for some people, they will say, okay, here's an issue, here's a problem. Everyone take this challenge. We're gonna, think on it overnight. Use all your theta waves. Go to the gym. Go for a walk the dog. Wash the dishes. Whatever. Come back in the morning. We'll meet, and then we'll see what came up. Right? We'll let you have your idea flow come back. So all these things I learned had to do with how our brains work, and a lot of it circled around recognition, acknowledgement, kind of our industry all by itself. Our industry benefits from what we have, which is a negativity bias. And that comes from our ancestors. They got way more information that was valuable to them that was negative, right? If an animal over there is about to spring and could, do away with me, that is information that is valuable to me. That's going to be what I focus on. Someone roasted a goat and I had dinner. That's great. That's awesome. But I'm way more interested in the things that might make dinner out of me. So our negativity bias dominates our brain. It's all goes through the amygdala, right? If you talk about it being emotionally hijacked, that's where all that's happening. It's way more, that's rage, fear conditioning. Anything bad happens to you, you remember it. That is solid. You hold that. Okay, now great for process improvement, seeing waste, what doesn't work. Awesome. We're kind of lined up for that. Humans are built to see what doesn't work. What we're not lined up to do is to catch things working and to see what people are doing that's good. We're not geared to do that. We can train ourselves, but it takes effort. So once again, we're having an impact. We might be the kind of person that starts every email with, can you fix, like, and I remember telling one colleague a while back, I said, do me a favor, when you write an email, go back before you send it and just say, hi, how you doing? I hope everything's okay. I said, just be a human and then get to the thing you want them to fix or whatever it is. And she told me years later, and that sounds kind of contentious, we're still buds, but she said that was so helpful to me. I cannot tell you. Like, just sit for a second, think of the human I'm talking to, once again, focus on the other, and then come back to the thing that you want to fix, because our brains are hardwired to see what's not working.
I want to ask you about your experiences with continuous improvement in your home life. How do you use what you teach in order to make your life simpler?
In my home life, I remember one big event I started over 15 years ago. I would run a work day for my mom's birthday, which is she'd be 93 coming 29th of this month. And every October, usually early November, we would throw a huge work party and then throw a birthday party for her. It was all a gift. So it was cleaning up her yard. It was repairing some of the boards on her deck. It was getting rid of newspapers or helping her sort her files, getting books she didn't want to the library. So and people would come and I'd have a big list. And they'd say, what needs doing? And I'd stop what I was doing and I'd get to the list and I'd say, well, there's a group chopping wood that fell down in the storm to stack for firewood. You could go there. And I would stop and I'd be the bottleneck. People would show up and it got big. It got to be like over 30 people and we'd throw a big party and it went on for 15 years. And I don't know what year it hit me, but I was like, I have a continuous improvement tool so that I am no longer the bottleneck in this silly process. So I brought my flip chart, which I'm sure a bunch of them are going, what'd she bring a flip chart to the driveway for? I'm like, what's going on here? Elizabeth's bringing her work home. So then I put a flip chart up and I drew lines and I made to do, doing, and done, made a Kanban board, right? So for those of you who have never used a Kanban board or know what the word Kanban mean, I think Kanban just means signboard, but it's saying, there's one lane, it could be vertical or horizontal. One lane is for things that are going to be done. And then in the middle is when they're being worked on, that's doing. And then done, now you move your tasks over once you finish them. And I put all the Post-it notes on the left and I color coded them, yard work, indoor work, dangerous work or work that involves knowing some skill like carpentry. Anyway, all kinds of stuff. And then people just come to the board and they'd look at the board and they'd move stuff in or they'd see what was going on. They'd see where they could go to be involved. And at the end of the day, and I remember at some point it got taken over from me. Like they've started, renaming things and saying like, it's on and so done. And they put like comments on it, like beer, we need the beer party has to happen. When does that happen? And then at the end, one of my sisters who really, truly not in my world at all in terms of continuous improvement, she just stood up and she'd name something that was still in the doing corridor and she'd say, trimming the yew bush, and someone would yell, so done. And then she'd put it on the side and it was hilarious. And I sort of lost the reins, and it was kind of a beautiful thing that I didn't have the reins. I didn't need the reins. I didn't need to be in charge of the list or the arbiter of work, and it could go without me. We're not gonna run it this year, and I'm missing it. I was like, I love that. I have my board ready to go.
Oh, that's so exciting. I love that you mentioned Kanban. We have a couple of months ago, we started school a couple months ago, and we put up a Kanban board ourselves because my daughter is having trouble like with chores. And we've changed it over a couple times, it evolves. And it's my husband, and the three of us that use it, the one that uses it religiously is my husband. He's an engineer. He loves stacking the done
Yeah.
done stickies in the done pot. Like he almost brags about it. Look at all the beautiful work I've done, and I love it. Great, awesome. Because my daughter sees that, and her little pile is like 2 things, and she goes, "Well, I probably need to do some more things if I'm going to get my allowance this week, right?"
Yes, she
So I
does.
love Kanban boards. They're great visual, and they're super simple for people to start
Yeah.
with. Super
Simplicity,
simple.
right?
Exactly. And going to Savage Simplicity, at this point, you've written a couple of books, you've coached thousands of people, you've been a keynote all over the place, you travel. What is exciting? So you've done it all. What is exciting you right now?
Just what I talked about, like I said, the praise paradox came out of Picture Yourself a Leader and some of the work that I had become aware of in terms of what's happening in our brains. And now to be able to then dive even deeper into this, into what's happening in our brains, and then bring that. I just built, or recently built a workshop, the Praise Paradox workshop. So that being able to work with intact teams, because then you're all surfacing like, okay, what are all of our feelings about praise? Because it's not all good, right? We've got some things we feel great about, some things we're like, hey, not everyone gets a trophy, and people got paid. Isn't that like acknowledgement? Like I told them last week. And then you have like boomer attitudes about work, you have Gen Z attitudes about work, so it's all over the board. And just surfacing that is massive because that is the basis, that's the foundation of how we behave or why we behave the way we do. So doing that with teams and understanding, okay, where are we at, what's our current state, what are we doing now for praise practices, informal, formal, right? Sometimes we have shout out Fridays. Is it the same person getting shout out every Friday? Like what, we have it on a huddle board, do we have acknowledgement there? How is that working? So just looking at how do we do it now, what's working about it, what isn't working about it. Some people, I just worked with a group and they were like, you know what? Handwritten notes, they're huge. There's nothing like it, right? And as AI becomes more and more a factor, like, are you okay with AI telling you, good on you, it's your 5th year anniversary, you made it 5 years, like, meh. So,
Mm-hmm.
just those realities. Anyway, that's become really rich because then you can have a hand in once you get that all out, then all right, well, what do we want it to be? Right? Then you could
Mm-hmm.
experiment. I'm going to talk with Mark Graben's connect. You know Mark Graben, you've heard of Mark.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's connected to KaiNexus. They make software to be a support continuous improvement. And uh I got the shout out Fridays from them, and I just met them at the AME conference, and or Greg Jacobson, the CEO, and he said, you know what, it's morphed, we've kind of changed it over the years, we keep tweaking it. So I realize people are always tweaking how they work acknowledgement and praise because you could always do better, right? It's a system that helps you respect people. And if you don't if you don't pay attention to that, you lose a huge component of your culture. That is how people feel they belong. It's how they form trust, feel safe enough to collaborate, innovate, um, everything. So that is so foundational, but we are not clear on it as
Mm-hmm.
organizations generally, and individuals. We might have like our own, informal, but yeah, it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, that praise and recognition piece of it is sort of the critical puzzle piece for forming high performing teams, right? You could have performing teams. You could have teams that work okay together and do their work and everything else, but high performing teams are a different animal. And you have to build that with intention. And I think the praise paradox and your work around that, and helping leaders understand that the importance is really critical to building those high performing teams because they're gonna go so far and so fast, if you can set them up for success. All right. So the podcast isn't just about productivity. It's also, about simplifying your life. And
Yeah.
so what are some shortcuts or simplifications that you do in order to make your days simpler and better, saner?
Um, let's see. I'm gonna give you a really funny one. And I love this is like my home right now. I live on Cape Cod, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm yards away from the ocean. I'm not beachfront, but I'm a beach walk, so I could get down there pretty easily. And I love clamming, right? And you think
Oh.
about clamming, you're gonna bring a bucket, and you're gonna bring a rake, and all the paraphernalia. You've got to get yourself to a sand flat, and that might be a distance away from the shore. That could be a boat. You might have to get something to get yourself where you need to go. But I love clamming so much that I just do it wherever I go. So if I'm swimming, I will reach in the ground and see, is this a clam bed? Are there clam beds here? Is this And what made sense was just to stick the clams in my bathing suit. And I swear, I've taught this, especially to young kids, especially young girls. We all got suits that can hold stuff. So I think I once had 90 clams in my bathing suit. I was like, it was a workout just swimming back to where I had put in, because I was like, oh my God, this is so heavy. So just that little, and I love that. And I have to get new suits because I shred them, but over time. Or now I've located, okay, these suits are for clamming, these suits are not. You can't wreck these suits. These suits you can still shred. That was just something that when you asked that question, it just came to my mind. I'm like, well, that I simplified. No boots, no rake, no basket, no boat. Yeah, just go and stick them in your suit.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's what an innovative idea.
And here's one that's probably more to your point, in the home. And my husband, not in my world at all, although he has a process mind. And sometimes when I'll say, oh, we got to figure this out, and he goes, yeah, we're going to Lean Six Sigma something out of this. And I'm like, okay.
Much gratitude for today's guest, the incredible Elisabeth Swan, thought leader and keynote speaker, consultant, trainer, author, podcaster, and problem-solving powerhouse. Connect with Elisabeth on LinkedIn at LinkedIn/Elisabeth Swan with an S and one N, or you can find her on her website, www.elisabethswan.com. And finally, make sure you like, subscribe, and share our episodes on youtube.com/Savage Simplicity. You can find Savage Simplicity as well on TikTok /Savage Simplicity. And you can find my signature lifestyle designs on cute apparel and accessories on my Etsy shop at Etsy /Savage Simplicity Swag. Please share this podcast in order to help it grow. This has been your host, Bernadette Hill, reminding you that sometimes in order to simplify your life, you have to just be savage.